You're not my mother anymore. You're just an obstacle between us and what we deserve." Those words came from my son's mouth while his wife stood behind him, smiling like she'd just won a prize. I'm Beatrice Halloway, 72 years old, and I never imagined that the child I bore in agony, raised through poverty and loved without condition, would one day look me in the eye and call me an obstacle. For 43 years, I worked as a seamstress in a garment factory on the south side of Pittsburgh. My fingers bled into those fabrics more times than I can count. I earned $9.50 an hour for the first decade, then $13 after the union fought for us. Every paycheck went the same way: rent, food, and my son Brendan's future. His father Thomas died in a warehouse accident when Brendan was only 6 months old. I got $8,000 from the company settlement. That money paid for Thomas's funeral and exactly 3 months of rent. After that, it was just me and my sewing machine against the world. I put Brendan through community college. I paid $4,200 out of pocket for his associate degree because he didn't qualify for enough financial aid. I told him it didn't matter, that I'd pick up overtime, that we'd make it work. And we did. When he married Vanessa 4 years ago, I thought I was gaining a daughter. She was charming at first, always complimenting my cooking, asking about my childhood. I even made her wedding dress by hand, 60 hours of beadwork and lace. She cried when she saw it and called me the mother she never had. But something shifted after the wedding. The calls became shorter. The visits felt like obligations. And whenever money came up, Vanessa's voice would turn sharp, like she was reminding me of a debt I didn't know I owed. I helped them with $1,800 for their security deposit when they moved into a bigger apartment. I paid their car insurance for 7 months straight when Brendan lost his job. That was $9,400 total. I bought groceries every week and left them on their doorstep, pretending I'd accidentally bought too much. I never asked for anything back. I'm a mother. That's what we do. But Vanessa started to see my sacrifices differently. To her, they weren't love. They were proof that I had money to spare. And if I had money to spare, then I owed them more. Last year, I did something I never thought I'd do. I played the Pennsylvania lottery. Just once. A ticket cost $5, and I bought it on a Tuesday after my shift, standing in line at the corner store with my swollen feet aching inside my old sneakers. I didn't check the numbers for 3 days. When I finally did, my hands shook so badly I dropped my glasses. I had won $3.7 million. I sobbed in my kitchen that night, not from joy, but from relief. Relief that I could finally rest, that I wouldn't die bent over a sewing machine, that maybe, just maybe, I could buy myself a little house with a garden and live out my last years in peace. I told no one, not Brendan, not Vanessa, not even my co-worker Rita, who I'd known for 30 years. But 2 weeks later, Vanessa found out anyway. And that's when my son stopped calling me Mom and started calling me an obstacle. I still don't know how Vanessa found out about the lottery win. Maybe she saw the letter from the State Lottery Commission that I'd hidden in my bedroom drawer. Maybe she'd been going through my mail. All I know is that 3 weeks after I claimed the money, she showed up at my apartment with a look on her face I'd never seen before. Hungry, calculating, cold. She didn't even say hello. She just walked past me into my living room, sat down on my worn couch and said, "Beatrice, we need to talk about your financial situation." My financial situation. As if I were a child who needed guidance. "What do you mean?" I asked, still standing by the door. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. It was a local news article. Pittsburgh woman wins $3.7 million in state lottery. Identity withheld. The date matched exactly when I'd claimed my ticket. "This is you, isn't it?" she said flatly. My throat went dry. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Vanessa leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. "Beatrice, I'm not judging you. I'm happy for you, really. But we need to discuss how this affects the family." "Affects the family?" I finally managed. "Yes. Brendan and I have been drowning in debt. We owe $18,000 on our credit cards. Our rent just went up $400 a month. Brendan's been working himself to death, and you've been sitting on millions. I felt my chest tighten. Vanessa, I just got this money. I haven't even thought about us, she interrupted. That's the problem, Beatrice. You've always been selfish. You think doing the bare minimum makes you some kind of saint, but real mothers share everything. The word selfish hit me like a slap. I'd given this woman and my son everything I had for years, and now I was selfish. I think you should leave, I whispered. She stood up slowly, her face hardening. Fine. But when Brendan hears about this, don't expect him to take your side. He's my husband now, not your little boy anymore. She walked out, letting the door slam behind her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, the venom in her voice, the way she'd looked at me. Not like a person, but like an ATM that had stopped dispensing cash. The next morning, Brendan called. His voice was distant, rehearsed. Mum, Vanessa told me about the lottery. Why didn't you tell me? I was going to, I said, tears already forming. I just needed time to think. Time to think about what? We're your family. You don't need to think about helping your family. Brendan, I worked for 43 years for this. Can't I just what, Mum? Be greedy. Vanessa's right. You've changed. Money's already corrupting you and you haven't even spent it yet. I wanted to scream that I'd changed nothing, that I was the same woman who'd bled for him, sacrificed for him, loved him unconditionally. But he'd already hung up. For the next 2 weeks, they froze me out completely. No calls, no texts. When I drove to their apartment to try to talk, Vanessa answered the door and said, Brendan doesn't want to see you right now. You've hurt him deeply. Then she closed the door in my face. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the wreath on their door, the one I'd bought them last Christmas, and realised that I had somehow become the villain in my own son's life. That's when the letters started arriving. The first letter came in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, no signature. Dear Beatrice, you are hereby advised that your son and daughter-in-law are entitled to financial compensation for emotional distress caused by your willful concealment of assets. Failure to respond within 10 days will result in legal action. I read it 3 times, my hands trembling. It sounded official, but something about it felt wrong. The language was too vague. There was no law firm name, no case number. I called Brendan immediately. He answered on the 5th ring. Did you send me a legal letter? I asked, my voice shaking. There was a pause. Then, Vanessa thought it might get your attention. Brendan, this isn't real legal paperwork. This is intimidation. Call it whatever you want, Mum. But we're serious. You owe us. I don't owe you my lottery winnings, I shouted, something I'd never done before. I don't owe you anything. He laughed, cold, bitter. You know what? You're right. You don't owe us. Just like we don't owe you any more visits, any more calls, any more pretending like you're part of this family. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, feeling like the floor had opened beneath me. My son, my only child, had just disowned me over money I hadn't even touched yet. But Vanessa wasn't done. 2 days later, I went to my weekly bingo game at the community centre, something I'd done every Thursday for 8 years. It was my one social outlet, my one place to feel normal. When I walked in, the room went quiet. All 12 women turned to look at me. Rita, my oldest friend, wouldn't meet my eyes. I sat down at my usual table, and that's when Doris, the woman next to me, leaned over and whispered, Is it true you won the lottery and refused to help your own son? My blood ran cold. What? Vanessa was here on Tuesday. She told everyone. She said you're hoarding millions while Brendan works 2 jobs and can barely afford food. I looked around the room. Every face was a mixture of pity and judgment. That's not true, I said, louder than I meant to. That's not what happened. But Doris had already turned away. I sat through one game, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't mark my card. Then I left, walking past tables of women who'd known me for years, who now whispered as I passed. Vanessa had poisoned my only community against me. When I got home, there was another envelope taped to my door. This one had photos inside, printed screenshots of my bank account balance, my lottery claim form, even a picture of my car. At the bottom, in Vanessa's handwriting, "Everyone knows what you really are now." I locked myself inside and cried until I couldn't breathe. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly alone. But the humiliation wasn't over. 3 days later, I got a call from Brendan. His voice was unnaturally calm. "Mum, we're having a family gathering on Sunday. Vanessa's parents, her sister, a few cousins. We'd like you to come." I was so desperate to be included again, I said yes immediately. Sunday came. I brought a casserole, the same one Brendan used to love as a child. I wore my best dress. I even brought a card with $500 cash inside, hoping it might smooth things over. When I arrived, Vanessa opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Beatrice, so glad you could make it. Come in, come in." The living room was full of people I barely knew, Vanessa's family. No one greeted me. I stood awkwardly by the door holding my casserole dish until Vanessa clapped her hands. "Everyone, can I have your attention? Beatrice has something she'd like to say." My heart sank. I don't... Go ahead, Beatrice," Vanessa said sweetly. "Tell everyone about your lottery win and tell them why you've decided not to help your only son." All eyes turned to me. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I opened my mouth but no words came out. Vanessa's smile widened. "No? Okay, I'll tell them. Beatrice won $3.7 million 3 months ago, and while Brendan and I struggle to pay rent, she's refused to give us a single cent, not one, even though we've supported her emotionally for years." Someone in the back muttered, "That's terrible." I looked at Brendan, silently begging him to defend me, but he just stared at the floor. Vanessa wasn't finished. "We invited her here today to give her one more chance to do the right thing, to be a real mother." My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the casserole dish. It shattered on the hardwood floor, red sauce splattering across the white rug. No one moved to help me. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "I think you should go, Beatrice." I left without cleaning up the mess, without saying goodbye, without looking back. As I drove home, I realized what had just happened. I hadn't been invited to a family gathering. I'd been invited to a public execution, and my own son had watched it happen without saying a word. The humiliation was just the beginning. What came next was calculated, methodical, and far more dangerous. 4 days after the family gathering, I received a certified letter. This time, it was real. A law firm, Hendrik Stone, LLP, was representing Brendan and Vanessa Monroe in a civil suit against me for undue enrichment and breach of implied family contract. I had to read it 3 times before I understood what they were claiming, that because I had financially supported them in the past, I had created an implied agreement to continue supporting them indefinitely. And now that I had millions, my failure to share it constituted a breach of that agreement. It was absurd, but it was also real. I called the number on the letterhead. A receptionist answered, and I asked to speak to the attorney handling my case. I was transferred to a man named Douglas Hendricks. "Mrs. Halloway," he said smoothly, "I understand this is difficult, but my clients feel deeply betrayed. They're not asking for the full amount, just $850,000 to cover debts, medical expenses, and emotional distress." "Emotional distress," I nearly shouted. "They've been torturing me." "That's not how they see it," he replied calmly. "Look, we can avoid court entirely if you're willing to settle. Sign over $850,000, and this all goes away. Otherwise, we'll see you in front of a judge, and I promise you, family cases like this get very ugly, very public." I hung up, my entire body shaking. That night I couldn't eat. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the lawsuit papers, wondering how my life had come to this. The next day, I went to the bank to check on my lottery funds. I'd set up a special account, untouchable except by me, with a financial advisor managing the investments. I just wanted to make sure everything was still secure. The bank manager, a kind woman named Phyllis, greeted me warmly, but when I asked to review my account, her expression changed. "Mrs. Halloway, there's been some unusual activity." My heart stopped. "What kind of activity?" She pulled up my account on her computer. 3 attempts were made yesterday to access your account remotely. Someone tried to log in using your name, birth date, and social security number. They failed because we have 2-factor authentication, but they tried to bypass it by calling our customer service line and pretending to be you. Who was it? Phyllis hesitated. The phone number matched your son's. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "We've flagged your account," she continued. "No one can touch it without you physically being here with 2 forms of ID. But Mrs. Halloway, you need to be very careful. If someone has your personal information, they can do a lot of damage." I drove home in a daze. My son, my own son, had tried to steal from me. When I got back to my apartment, there was another envelope waiting. Inside was a fake power of attorney document with my signature forged at the bottom. A post-it note was stuck to it. "Just sign the real one and save us all the trouble. V." They were trying to trick me into signing away control of my money. That's when I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I thought might help. Leonard Briggs, a retired attorney who'd once done estate planning for my late husband's family. He was 81 now, living in a nursing home, but his mind was still sharp. When I explained what was happening, there was a long silence on the other end. Then he said, "Beatrice, you're being financially abused by your own family. This is elder exploitation, and it's a crime. You need to document everything, every letter, every call, every threat, and you need to fight back before they destroy you." "How?" I whispered. "First, you record everything. Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state. Every conversation you have with them from now on, you record. Second, you get a real lawyer, someone younger and meaner than me. And third, you stop playing defense. It's time to go on offense." That night, I went to an electronics store and bought a small digital voice recorder. My hands shook as I paid for it, but Leonard was right. If I didn't fight back, I'd lose everything. Not just my money, but my dignity, my peace, my life. The next morning, Vanessa called. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Beatrice, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Can we meet for coffee? Just the 2 of us. Woman to woman." I pressed the record button on the device in my pocket. "Sure, Vanessa. Where?" We met at a diner near her apartment. She ordered a latte and smiled at me like we were old friends. "Look," she said, stirring her drink, "I know Brendan and I have been pushing hard, but you have to understand. We're desperate. We're about to lose our apartment. Brendan's health insurance just got cancelled. We need help, and you're the only one who can give it." "I've already helped you for years," I said carefully. She leaned in, her voice dropping. "Not like this. You have millions, Beatrice. Millions. And you're hoarding it like some kind of dragon. Do you know how that looks? Do you know how that feels to us? It's my money, Vanessa." Her smile vanished. "No, it's family money. And if you don't share it willingly, we'll take it by force. That lawsuit? That's just the beginning. We'll declare you mentally incompetent. We'll say you have dementia. We'll get a judge to put us in charge of your finances, and then you won't have a choice." My blood ran cold. "You can't do that." She smiled again, colder this time. "Watch us." She stood up, dropped a $5 bill on the table and walked out. I sat there, the recorder still running in my pocket, and realised that Vanessa wasn't just greedy. She was dangerous, and my son was letting her do this. The threat of a competency hearing hung over me like a blade. For 3 days I barely slept. I researched online, Read horror stories of elderly people losing control of their lives, their money, their freedom, all because a family member convinced a judge they were unfit. I was 72, but I wasn't senile. I paid my bills on time. I drove without incident. I managed my own medications, but none of that mattered if Vanessa could find a doctor willing to say otherwise. On the fourth day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, clipped and professional. "Mrs. Halloway, this is Dr. Simmons from Gateway Psychiatric Services. Your family has requested a home evaluation for cognitive decline. I'd like to schedule a visit this week." My stomach dropped. "I didn't request this." "No, your son did. It's a standard wellness check. Nothing to worry about." "I don't consent," I said firmly. There was a pause. "Mrs. Halloway, refusal to cooperate can be noted in the report. I'd strongly recommend you allow the evaluation." I hung up, my hands trembling. They were building a case. Step by step, they were constructing a narrative. The confused old woman, hoarding money, refusing help, declining mentally. And once that narrative was in a legal document, it would be almost impossible to undo. I called Leonard immediately. "They're trying to have me declared incompetent," I told him, my voice breaking. "Then we move faster," he said. "You need to get a cognitive evaluation from your own doctor, today. Someone reputable who can testify you're of sound mind. And Beatrice, you need to prepare yourself for what comes next. This is going to get worse before it gets better." I made an appointment with my primary care physician, Dr. Raymond Chu, who I'd been seeing for 12 years. He squeezed me in that afternoon. After a full cognitive assessment, memory tests, logic puzzles, coordination checks, he looked at me seriously. "Beatrice, your cognitive function is completely normal. Better than normal, actually, for your age. Whatever's happening with your family, it has nothing to do with your mental state." "Can you write that down?" I asked. "Officially?" He nodded and printed out a formal evaluation on his clinic letterhead, signed and dated. I left his office with the document clutched in my hand, feeling like I'd just won a small battle, but the war was far from over. That night, Brendan showed up at my door. I hadn't seen him in person since the disastrous family gathering. He looked thinner, older, exhausted. "Mum, can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked past me into the living room and I noticed he was carrying a folder. "What's that?" I asked. He set it on my coffee table. "Papers, for your own good." I opened the folder. Inside were guardianship documents, legal forms that would make Brendan my financial guardian, giving him control over all my accounts, property, and medical decisions. "Sign these," he said quietly. "No." "Mum, don't make this harder than it has to be. Vanessa and I are trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I shouted. "You're trying to steal from me." His face hardened. "You're not thinking clearly. That's why we need to do this. Once you're under our care, you'll be safe. You'll be taken care of." "I'm not signing those papers, Brendan." He stood up, his jaw clenched. "Then we'll do this the hard way." He walked to my door, opened it, and Vanessa stepped inside. Behind her were two men I didn't recognize, large, intimidating, arms crossed. "What is this?" I whispered. Vanessa's smile was triumphant. "This is us giving you one last chance, Beatrice. Sign the papers, or we take them to court and you lose everything. Your money, your freedom, your dignity. We'll have you declared incompetent, and you'll spend the rest of your life in a state facility while we manage your assets." One of the men stepped forward and placed a pen on the table in front of me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might collapse. I looked at Brendan, searching for any trace of the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sign it, Mom," he said flatly. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking. I looked down at the signature line, and then I thought of Leonard's words. "Stop playing defense. Go on offense." I set the pen down. "No." Vanessa's face twisted with rage. "You stubborn old—" "Get out of my home," I said, standing up. "All of you. Now. We're not leaving until—" "Get out, or I'm calling the police." For a moment, no one moved. Then Vanessa laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Fine, but you'll regret this." They left, slamming the door behind them. I collapsed onto my couch, sobbing, my entire body shaking. But even as I cried, I felt something else rising inside me. Anger. For 72 years I had bent. I had sacrificed. I had given everything to everyone else. Not anymore. I pulled out my phone and called Leonard. "I'm ready to fight," I said. And for the first time in months, I meant it. Leonard gave me the name of an attorney. Someone he trusted, someone who specialized in elder law and family exploitation cases. Her name was Patricia Kovacs, and she had a reputation for being ruthless when it came to protecting vulnerable clients. I called her office the next morning. Her secretary said she was booked solid for 3 weeks, but when I mentioned Leonard Briggs's name and explained that I was facing imminent guardianship proceedings, she squeezed me in that same afternoon. Patricia's office was on the 4th floor of a renovated brick building downtown. When I walked in, I was surprised by how young she looked. Maybe 45, sharp-eyed, with short grey hair she wore without apology. She shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Halloway, Leonard told me about your situation. Sit down and tell me everything." For the next hour, I poured out the entire story. The lottery win, Vanessa's discovery, the humiliation at bingo, the fake legal letters, the attempted bank fraud, the recorded conversation at the diner, the home visit from the psychiatrist I never requested, and finally, the confrontation with the guardianship papers. Patricia took notes on a yellow legal pad, her expression hardening with each new detail. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Halloway, what's happening to you is called financial exploitation of the elderly, and it's a felony in Pennsylvania. Your daughter-in-law has committed multiple crimes: fraud, attempted theft, coercion, and possibly conspiracy. Your son is complicit as an accessory." The words hung in the air. Felony. Crimes. My son. "I don't want to send Brendan to jail," I whispered. Patricia's expression softened slightly. "I understand. But you need to understand something too. If you don't fight back legally, they will destroy you. They will take your money, your autonomy, and your peace. This isn't about revenge. This is about survival." She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we file for an emergency restraining order against both Brendan and Vanessa. Second, we submit your cognitive evaluation from Dr. Chu to preempt any competency challenge. Third, we turn over all your evidence, the recordings, the forged documents, the bank fraud attempts, to the district attorney's office. And fourth, we file a countersuit for harassment, defamation, and attempted exploitation." My head was spinning. All of that? All of that. And Mrs. Halloway? We do it fast. Tomorrow. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. For months I'd been reacting, defending, retreating, but Patricia was right. It was time to stop running. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and did something I hadn't done in weeks. I made a plan. I pulled out every piece of evidence I'd collected: the fake legal letter, the forged power of attorney, the bank manager's report about the attempted fraud, the recording of Vanessa threatening me at the diner, and Dr. Chu's cognitive evaluation. I organised everything into a binder, labelled and dated. Then I made 3 copies, one for Patricia, one for the police, and one for myself. As I worked, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was focused. My phone buzzed. A text from Brendan. "Mum, please reconsider. We don't want to hurt you. We just want what's fair." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I blocked his number. The next morning, Patricia and I went to the courthouse. We filed for the emergency restraining order first. The judge reviewed our petition, read the excerpts from the recorded conversation, and granted it immediately. "Mrs. Halloway," he said, peering at me over his glasses, "this order prohibits Brendan and Vanessa Monroe from contacting you, coming within 500 feet of your residence, or attempting to access your financial accounts. Violation of this order is a criminal offence. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honour," I said. As we left the courthouse, Patricia handed me a copy of the signed order. Keep this with you at all times. If they violate it, you call the police immediately. Next, we went to the district attorney's office. Patricia had already made an appointment with an assistant DA named Michael Torres, who handled elder abuse cases. We sat in his windowless office and went through the evidence piece by piece. Torres listened carefully, occasionally asking questions, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Halloway, I'm going to be honest with you. Cases like this are difficult because they involve family. Juries are often reluctant to convict children who've exploited their parents. But what you have here is substantial. Documented fraud, recorded threats, attempted identity theft. I think we can build a strong case. What happens now? I asked. I'll open an investigation. We'll subpoena their phone records, bank records, and any communications they've had with that law firm. If the evidence holds up, we'll bring charges, likely felony theft by deception and exploitation of a care-dependent person. My throat tightened. And Brendan? Torres's expression softened. I know this is hard, but your son made choices. He's an adult. He's responsible for those choices. I nodded, unable to speak. As Patricia and I walked back to her car, I felt exhausted, but strangely light. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying the weight alone. What now? I asked. Patricia smiled grimly. Now? We wait for them to make a mistake. And trust me, they will. She was right. 3 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Vanessa. You think you're so smart, don't you? She hissed. Filing restraining orders, running to lawyers. You're going to regret this, Beatrice. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I stayed silent, my hand steady. Are you listening to me? She screamed. I'll destroy you. I hung up and immediately called Patricia. She just violated the restraining order, I said calmly. Patricia's voice was sharp with satisfaction. Call the police, right now. And Beatrice, save that call log. I called 911. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers were at my door taking my statement. I showed them the restraining order and the call log showing Vanessa's number. One of the officers, a woman named Officer Martinez, looked at me with something like admiration. Ma'am, we'll send this to the DA's office. This is a clear violation. She'll likely face contempt charges. After they left, I sat down at my kitchen table and realized something profound. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman who had decided to fight back, and I was winning. Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia and I built our case like architects constructing a fortress. Every document, every recording, every witness statement was carefully catalogued and cross-referenced, but we needed more. The restraining order violation is good, Patricia said during one of our meetings. But to really bury them in court, we need to prove a pattern of predatory behaviour. Has Vanessa done this to anyone else? Does she have debts we don't know about? What about Brendan's financial history? I didn't know the answers, but I knew someone who might. Rita, my old friend from bingo. Despite the coldness she'd shown me after Vanessa's smear campaign, Rita had known Brendan since he was a child. If anyone had information, it would be her. I called her from a coffee shop, nervous about how she'd react. Rita, it's Beatrice. There was a long pause. Beatrice. I heard about the restraining order. Then you know I wasn't lying, I said quietly. Another pause, then a sigh. I never thought you were lying, honey. I just didn't know what to say. Vanessa came at us hard and I was a coward. I'm sorry. Relief washed over me. Rita, I need your help. Anything. Do you know anything about Vanessa's past? Before she married Brendan? Rita was quiet for a moment. I know she was married once before. Divorced. And I remember hearing something about a lawsuit. Her ex-husband sued her for forging his signature on a loan application, but I don't know the details. My heart raced. Do you remember his name? Give me a minute. I heard papers rustling. Here it is. I wrote it down once when Brendan mentioned it. Marcus Delgado. I thanked Rita profusely and immediately called Patricia with the information. 2 days later, Patricia's private investigator tracked down Marcus Delgado. He lived in Ohio now, remarried with 2 kids. When Patricia contacted him and explained the situation, he agreed to provide a statement. What he told us was chilling. Marcus had been married to Vanessa for 3 years. During that time, she'd systematically drained his savings, forged his signature on loan documents totaling $45,000, and then filed for divorce when he discovered the fraud. He'd sued her and won a judgment, but she'd declared bankruptcy and he'd never seen a penny. She's a predator, Marcus told Patricia over the phone. She finds vulnerable people, gains their trust and bleeds them dry. I tried to warn your client's son when they got engaged, but he wouldn't listen. Patricia got Marcus's statement notarized and added it to our evidence file, but we still needed more, something that would prove Vanessa and Brendan's intentions beyond doubt. That's when I remembered the law firm, Hendrik Stone, the one that had sent me the lawsuit papers. Patricia, what if that law firm doesn't exist? I asked during one of our sessions. She looked at me sharply. What makes you say that? The letterhead looked professional, but the language in the demand letter was vague. And when I called, the attorney didn't ask me any real questions. He just pushed for a settlement. Patricia pulled up her laptop and searched for Hendrik Stone, LLP. After a few minutes, she looked up with a grim smile. There is no law firm by that name registered in Pennsylvania, or anywhere else. My stomach dropped. So it was fake? Completely, which means Vanessa and Brendan created fraudulent legal documents to intimidate you. That's another felony. She immediately forwarded the information to Michael Torres at the DA's office. But the biggest break came from an unexpected source. One evening, I got a call from a number with a New York area code. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Halloway, my name is Gretchen Monroe. I'm Vanessa's older sister. I froze. How did you get this number? From the court filings. I saw that Vanessa and Brendan were being sued, so I looked into it. Mrs. Halloway, I need to tell you something. Vanessa has done this before. Done what? Targeted older family members for money. She convinced our grandmother to change her will 5 years ago, cutting out the rest of the family. When our grandmother died, Vanessa inherited everything, $200,000. The family tried to contest it, but by then Vanessa had already spent most of it. My hands were shaking. Why are you telling me this? Because I should have stopped her then, and I didn't. I won't make that mistake twice. I'll testify if you need me to. I gave her Patricia's contact information, and within days Gretchen provided a detailed affidavit about Vanessa's history of financial manipulation, with Marcus Delgado's statement, Gretchen's affidavit, the fake law firm discovery, and all the recorded evidence. Our case was becoming ironclad. But Patricia warned me. They're going to fight back, and when cornered, people like Vanessa get desperate. She was right. 1 week before our scheduled court hearing, I came home to find my apartment door ajar. My heart pounded as I pushed it open. Inside, everything had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, cushions slashed, papers scattered everywhere. But nothing was stolen. They weren't looking for valuables. They were looking for evidence. I called the police immediately. Officer Martinez arrived with another officer, and they dusted for fingerprints. They found several clear prints on my filing cabinet, the one where I'd kept copies of all my documents. But I'd moved those documents to Patricia's office weeks ago. They'd found nothing. 2 days later, the fingerprint results came back. Brendan's prints were all over the filing cabinet. Officer Martinez looked at me with something like sadness. Mrs. Halloway, your son committed breaking and entering. That's another charge we'll have to add. I nodded, numb. That night, I sat in my ransacked apartment, and felt a strange sense of clarity. I had given Brendan every chance to stop, to turn back, to remember who he used to be. But he'd made his choice. And now, I had to make mine. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Plain wooden benches, fluorescent lights, and a judge's bench that seemed to loom over everything. I sat beside Patricia at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle, Brendan and Vanessa sat with their new attorney, a young man who looked barely out of law school. Vanessa wore a conservative navy dress and had her hair pulled back in a bun, playing the part of the concerned daughter-in-law. Brendan stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. He hadn't looked at me once since entering the room. Judge Margaret Holloway, no relation, entered, and we all stood. She was a black woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Be seated," she said crisply. "We're here today for multiple matters, a restraining order hearing, a motion to dismiss charges of elder exploitation, and preliminary criminal proceedings. Let's begin with the restraining order." Patricia stood. "Your Honour, we're seeking to make permanent the emergency restraining order against Brendan Monroe and Vanessa Monroe. The defendants have engaged in a sustained pattern of harassment, financial coercion and threats against Mrs. Holloway, culminating in a break-in at her residence." Vanessa's attorney jumped up. "Your Honour, my clients are simply concerned family members trying to ensure Mrs. Holloway's well-being. She's 72 years old, recently came into a large sum of money and has been making erratic decisions." "Erratic decisions," Patricia's voice was sharp. "Mrs. Holloway underwent a full cognitive evaluation by her physician of 12 years. I have the report here, and it shows she is completely mentally competent." She handed a copy to the judge. Judge Holloway read it carefully, then looked at Vanessa's attorney. "Continue." "Your Honour, even if Mrs. Holloway is currently competent, the family's concern is valid. And as for the alleged break-in, Mr. Monroe still had a key to his mother's apartment from years ago. He went to check on her welfare when she stopped returning calls. He went to search for evidence," Patricia interrupted. "His fingerprints were found on a filing cabinet that had been pried open. Nothing was taken because the documents he was looking for had already been secured elsewhere. This was intimidation, pure and simple." Judge Holloway raised a hand. "I'll hear from Mrs. Holloway directly. Mrs. Holloway, please approach the witness stand." My legs felt like water as I stood and walked to the witness box. The bailiff swore me in, and I sat down, acutely aware of every eye in the room. Judge Holloway looked at me kindly. "Mrs. Holloway, in your own words, please tell me what's been happening." I took a deep breath and began. I told her about the lottery win, about keeping it private to plan carefully. I told her about Vanessa discovering it and immediately demanding money. I told her about the fake legal letters, the public humiliation at bingo, the forged power of attorney documents, the attempted bank fraud, and then I told her about the confrontation in my living room, the guardianship papers, the intimidation, the 2 men Vanessa had brought with her. "Your Honour," I said, my voice steady now, "I raised my son alone for 43 years. I gave him everything I had. I never asked for anything in return except his love. But the moment I had something of my own, something I'd earned through decades of labour, he and his wife decided I wasn't entitled to keep it." I looked directly at Brendan for the first time. "I don't even recognise the man sitting over there. That's not the boy I raised." Brendan's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw a flash of the child he'd been. But then Vanessa leaned over and whispered something in his ear, and his expression hardened again. Judge Holloway nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. You may step down." As I returned to my seat, Patricia stood again. "Your Honour, we have additional evidence. May I approach?" "Proceed." Patricia handed the judge a USB drive. "This contains a recording of Vanessa Monroe threatening Mrs. Holloway at a public restaurant, explicitly stating she would have Mrs. Holloway declared mentally incompetent if she didn't turn over her money. We also have affidavits from 2 witnesses, Vanessa's ex-husband and her sister, detailing a pattern of financial predation spanning over a decade." Vanessa's attorney shot to his feet. "Objection. Those affidavits are prejudicial and irrelevant to—" I'll decide what's relevant, Counselor, Judge Holloway said coldly. She plugged the USB drive into her computer and listened to the recording through headphones. The courtroom was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. I watched the judge's face as she listened. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes narrowed. When the recording ended, she removed the headphones and looked directly at Vanessa. Mrs. Monroe, did you threaten to have Mrs. Holloway declared mentally incompetent in order to gain control of her finances? Vanessa's lawyer whispered frantically to her, but she ignored him. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. Your Honor, that woman is hoarding millions while her own son struggles. She's selfish and cruel, and yes, I said what I said because someone needed to protect Brendan from her greed. The courtroom erupted. Patricia smiled slightly. Brendan dropped his head into his hands. Judge Holloway slammed her gavel. Order! Mrs. Monroe, sit down. But Vanessa wasn't finished. She's not a victim. She's a manipulative old woman who's been playing everyone for sympathy. That money should belong to the family, not just her. Mrs. Monroe! The judge's voice thundered through the courtroom. Sit down now, or I will hold you in contempt. Vanessa finally sat, breathing hard, her mask completely shattered. Judge Holloway turned to the assistant DA, Michael Torres, who'd been sitting quietly in the back. Mr. Torres, have you heard enough? Torres stood. Yes, Your Honor. The state is prepared to file formal charges against both defendants for attempted financial exploitation of a care-dependent person, fraud, and conspiracy. We're also adding charges of breaking and entering against Mr. Monroe. The judge nodded. I'm making the restraining order permanent. Brendan and Vanessa Monroe are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Holloway in any way, directly or indirectly, for a period of 5 years. Violation will result in immediate arrest. She looked at Vanessa with barely concealed disgust. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the State Attorney General's office for additional investigation into possible pattern racketeering. If you've done this to others, Mrs. Monroe, we will find out. Vanessa's face went white. Judge Holloway turned to Brendan. Mr. Monroe, you're an adult who made choices. You chose to participate in the systematic abuse of your own mother. I don't care what your wife convinced you to believe. You are responsible for your actions. Do you have anything to say? Brendan slowly stood. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Mum. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Judge Holloway banged her gavel. We're adjourned. Defendants will remain for processing. As the bailiffs approached Vanessa and Brendan, Vanessa suddenly lunged toward me, her face twisted with rage. This is your fault. You destroyed this family. I hope you die alone with your money. 2 bailiffs grabbed her, pulling her back as she screamed. Brendan just stood there, tears streaming down his face, watching as his wife was dragged from the courtroom. Patricia put a hand on my shoulder. It's over, Beatrice. You won. But as I walked out of that courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt free. 6 weeks after the hearing, Vanessa was sentenced to 18 months in county jail for elder exploitation, fraud, and attempted coercion. Her prior history with Marcus Delgado and her own grandmother had been presented as evidence of pattern behaviour, and the judge had shown no mercy. Brendan received a suspended sentence, 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory counselling. The judge said she believed he'd been manipulated by Vanessa, but that didn't excuse his actions. He sent me 1 letter during those weeks. It arrived in a plain envelope with no return address. Mum, I know sorry isn't enough. I know I broke something that can't be fixed. Vanessa showed me who I really was when I was weak, and I'm ashamed. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I remember who you were to me before I destroyed it. I love you. I'm sorry. Brendan. I read it once, folded it carefully, and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd be ready to respond. But not today. The lottery money sat in a trust, managed by a financial advisor Patricia had recommended. I hadn't touched most of it. Turns out after 72 years of living simply, I didn't need much. But I did make some changes. I sold my cramped apartment and bought a small house on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, 2 bedrooms, a garden, a porch where I could sit and watch the sunrise. The first morning in that house, I sat with my coffee and cried tears I didn't fully understand. Relief, maybe, or grief, or both. I used some of the money to establish the Thomas Halloway Memorial Scholarship Fund, named after my late husband. It would help single mothers pay for college. Every year, 5 women would receive $10,000 each, not enough to solve everything, but enough to make the impossible feel possible. Because I remembered what that felt like. Rita came to visit me in my new house, bringing fresh flowers and apologies that I told her I didn't need. We sat on the porch and drank iced tea, and she told me that the women at bingo had all realized they'd been manipulated by Vanessa. "We feel terrible, Beatrice," she said. "We should have trusted you." "You're human," I replied. "Vanessa was good at what she did." Rita squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than all of us." But I didn't feel strong. I just felt tired and peaceful and finally free. 3 months after the trial, I got a call from Gretchen, Vanessa's sister. She asked if she could visit, and despite my hesitation, I said yes. She arrived with a bottle of wine and a nervous smile. We sat in my living room and she told me about her family, about how Vanessa had poisoned every relationship she'd ever had, how their parents had eventually cut her off, how Gretchen herself had lost years trying to fix her sister. "I'm done now," Gretchen said quietly. "I testified against her, and my family hasn't spoken to me since. But I'd do it again. You deserved better." "So did you," I said. We became unlikely friends after that. Gretchen visited once a month, and we'd sit in my garden and talk about everything except Vanessa. As for Brendan, I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved to a different state after his probation ended. He'd started over. New job, new apartment, therapy twice a week. Someone told me he'd even started volunteering at a senior centre. I didn't reach out. Maybe someday. But for now, I needed the distance. One afternoon, while I was planting tomatoes in my garden, I realised something. I'd spent my entire life being someone's mother, someone's employee, someone's caretaker. I'd defined myself by what I gave to others. But now, for the first time, I was just Beatrice. And that was enough. I learned that true love cannot be bought or coerced. I learned that saying no is not selfishness. It's survival. And I learned that sometimes the people you save will be the ones who try to drown you. But I also learned that it's never too late to fight for yourself. Even at 72, I could still reclaim my life. I'm 73 now. My garden is thriving. My scholarship fund has helped 15 women go back to school, and I sleep peacefully every night knowing I don't owe anyone anything. The money is still there, carefully managed, slowly growing. But it doesn't define me anymore. It's just a tool, one that I use on my terms for my purposes, in my time. Sometimes I wonder if Brendan thinks about me, if he regrets what he did, or if Vanessa's voice still echoes in his head, telling him I was the villain. But mostly I don't think about him at all. I think about the sunrise over my garden. I think about the young mothers who cry when they receive their scholarship letters. I think about Rita's laugh and Gretchen's quiet strength and the way my tomatoes taste when I pick them fresh from the vine. I think about freedom. If you were in my position, would you have fought back? Or would you have given them the money to keep the peace? Let me know in the comments below.